Hello, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining. Welcome back to Terror to Triumph. I'm Alphonso Pelt, and last week we talked about breaking the silence. Today we're going a little deeper into one of the most painful ways that childhood abuse shows up in our daily lives. And that would be in our relationships, in our day-to-day, be it parents, siblings, be it friends, or your significant other. If you ever wonder why you tried to struggle to trust, why you sabotage good relationships, or why you find yourself repeating painful patterns, this episode is one for you. I would like to thank my guest today, unexpected guest. I would like to call her Miss Storm or Miss House. And welcome to the live of Terror to Triumph today. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
That's good to hear. If you want to chime in, it's nothing obligational for you to do so. Just whenever you feel like you want to add something or share something from your story, just chime in, okay? This is a open and judgment-free environment. And I'm sharing full disclosure about my situation and my past so that we can open the dialogue for those of us who are still in the shadows of our torment, trying to step out or find a way to seek a place to have refuge. And the first step is to open up and share the story, to understand and acknowledge that there has been something wrong in your life, or somebody has accosted you or inflicted you with some type of abuse. Today's episode, as I mentioned a little earlier, is how childhood abuse affects us as an adults in our relationships. So we are going to dig into a little bit of that today. Last week, we talked about trying to open up. This week, we're going to dig a little bit into the adult relationships and how our trauma follows us through life and affects us today as an adult. Childhood abuse doesn't end where we become adults. It travels with us. It shapes how we love, how we trust, and how we show up in most of our intimate connections. Understanding the connection between what happened to us as children and how we relate to others now is one of the most powerful steps of healing. Today, we're exploring the science and the stories behind this reality. We'll break down how abuse affects attachment, trust, relationship patterns, and we'll talk about trauma bonding, self-sabotage, and the ways our nervous system stays stuck in survival mode. I'll share pieces of my own journey and the relationships I've damaged and the patterns I've repeated and how I'm learning to break free of those mental configurations and engineering and how I develop these mechanisms to handle life situations as an adult. First of all, forgive me if I if I keep looking away. I have other cameras I'm looking at, so you might see me look away like I'm talking to somebody actually in front of me, but I'm not. It's actually two different cameras. And I'm filming myself as we do the live to post up on YouTube later on, and for the podcast to have the audio. So for the new listeners, the live podcast is www.terrortotriumph.buzzsprout.com. So go on there. What we're doing today will be recapped there every Thursday. As we do the new lives, they also will be going to Buzzsprout for the audio translation and podcast. Saturday announcement right quick. I will be moving this platform to YouTube live. That will be November 1st at 8 p.m. Terror to Triumph is going to transfer from TikTok to YouTube. So make your adjustments to meet us there. You can look up the handle Terror to Triumph on YouTube and you will find the snippets and the actual live video podcast from last week's episode, which was the inaugural episode. So now we're going to step on into the second segment of the show. Second segment. Let's start with attachment. When we were children, we developed what psychologists call styles, attachment styles, that is, based on how our caregivers respond to us. A secure attachment means we've learned that people are trustworthy, that our needs matter, and that we're safe. I thank you for joining the show. Please forgive me if I get your name wrong. Melem. Melem. You know what? Let me do this. Let me put my glasses on. I got to put my eyes on so I don't offend the listeners. I appreciate you for joining. This is Terror to Triumph. This is the second episode of this season, and this is season 1. Malem, thank you for joining. I appreciate you. Today, we are talking about how our childhood trauma affects us as adults and in our relationships. If you missed it last week, we talked about speaking out on childhood trauma, how it affects us and everything around us. And the power of speaking out is the first step of breaking free of the silence and the fear. Today, we have just entered into our second segment of this show, and it's the science of attachment. We're talking about attachment. When we're talking about attachment, it's about how our loved ones developed us, loved us, and gave us the wherewithal to trust, learn how to trust. When our childhood abuse is present, whether it's verbal, physical, sexual, or emotional, something different happens. Our developing brains learn that people closest to us are dangerous. Let me repeat that. As children, our developing brains tell us that the people that are closest to us are dangerous. And I'm going to step away from the script for a minute. We got to think about this for a second. So the ones that we supposed to trust the most, mother, father, uncle, aunt, sister, brother, pose a potential threat. They all do. That's how our minds think when the trauma happens as a child, because we don't know who we can trust at that point. And at that point, we think everybody has the potential to fail us in this regard. Okay, now we're going to keep on keeping on with the script, man. I don't want to get too far away from the train of thought. We learn that we can't trust. This isn't a character flaw. This is survival. Our nervous system's protecting us the only way they know how. I mean, we're kids, right? We haven't gone to psychological classes. You know, our parents haven't talked to us as an adult to give us the tools that we would need to learn how to deal with these things. First of all, they wouldn't even know what's happening to us, so they wouldn't even know to talk to us about it. Second of all, in most cases, they don't even recognize the flags that we're exhibiting to say, hey, something's going on. You know, so it's hard for a parent to address a situation when they're unaware of the situation. It would be proactive for parents to sit down with their children and discuss the situation with them so they can say, you know, before anything happens to my baby, let me explain to my baby what's right, what's wrong with adult interactions. Okay? Going back to the script. The problem is, as adults, we carry these protective patterns into relationships where they're no longer serve us. I mean, I'm going to get into that in a few. I'm going to just keep that pinned right there. We might struggle to trust even when someone is trustworthy. No matter how many of us have really done that. Welcome, Mary DeSantis. I appreciate you for joining. Welcome that. I'm not going to say the rest of that, but welcome, and I appreciate you for joining. This is the last episode that will be on TikTok. I'm moving to YouTube live next week. This is Terror to Triumph. I am Alphonso Pelt, and we're discussing survival of those who have survived through childhood trauma. We're trying to develop a community where we can talk, share, and learn how to be triumphant over the terror that has plagued us for so long. Last week's segment, if you missed it, was about learning what trauma is. And as we suffer the trauma, how we close ourselves off, and the power of speaking out to break free of the silence and the fear is most important. It's the first step into reclaiming your life. Today I have a guest with me, Miss House, and she's willing to be a guest on our show today to speak up and talk about whatever topics that we are discussing today. I've asked her to join us, and I want everybody to understand this point. If you're a guest on the show, I'm not pressuring anybody to speak up like you have to say something. I'm not going to question you like regular talk shows. If you come and you want to share your story, you can be on the show. You don't have to speak at all. I just appreciate you coming to the show. But if you do want to share your story, welcome, Carolina. I appreciate you for joining. If you want to share your story, you're more than welcome. I will be sharing my truth, and I'm using my truth as a platform for everybody else to springboard off of. I'm not here to be famous. I'm not here for monetization. I'm not here to be a big TikTok sensation or whatever. I'm here to help people because I wish I had the help. I'm 54 years old, and I just started seeing a therapist this year because I came to the summarization that my trauma was affecting my relationships so tough, I could not handle it anymore. So I had to say, whatever's in me, whatever's going on in my head, I had to figure it out. So I'm encouraging people to step forward. You know, if you don't want to comment or anything, like, share, and subscribe, hit the follow button, and just listen. Listening can help. You might gain some knowledge today that you could share with a friend that might be going through something. Or maybe I can teach you something, a flag to recognize when somebody's going through something, and you can address that situation appropriately. Okay, here's a little disclaimer. This is no way an attempt to be therapy. I'm not a professional. I myself am a survivor, and I'm taking my life lessons and offering them to you freely. Okay? Now, today's topic is about how childhood trauma affects us in our adult relationships. We're in the second segment now, and I'm talking about how childhood trauma is perceived or how it manifests. And we were talking about, as children, childhood trauma, when childhood trauma happens, our minds, still molding, are incapable of processing it. So we go into survival mode. And in survival mode, it teaches us, our minds teach us, that everyone is a potential threat. People are dangerous, especially the ones closest to us. So we develop trust issues at that point. Now, as adults, as I was saying, we carry these protective patterns into our relationships where they no longer serve us. We might struggle to trust even when someone is trustworthy. That's where I left off. We might push people away before they can hurt us. We might find ourselves drawn to people who mirror the dynamics we experienced as children. You ever heard of the person saying, "Why you always like people that hurt you?" You might hear a guy talking about somebody's like, "She only like bad boys." Well, you heard that said before. They only like guys that do people wrong. Don't they know they're going to get done wrong too, eventually? Well, it's the desire to want to be loved mixed with the messed up emotions of a psychological trauma. So when you combine those two dynamics, you get a person that's actively seeking someone who is detrimental to them. Not to say that everybody who gets in a relationship and it's a detrimental relationship and they know the person is not good for them is a survivor of childhood trauma. Not to say that. Because you could be a normal person, get into a relationship, and you just, like for a guy, us guys are visual creatures. We like what we see. So we get into a relationship with a woman. We say, "Dang, she fine." I'm going to be honest with you. This is an adult channel. And as an adult, we look at a woman, "Dang, she fine. She got hips. She got back. She got front. She got breasts. And she got behind. And I like what I see." Okay. So they go after that. But they don't know what they're chasing. They're not even in the least bit concerned about personality or mental state. They just chasing the image. And that's kind of what it's like with the childhood trauma. We're mentally chasing an image, okay? And that image is destructive for us. But we don't know, our mind has already processed to a certain point that it's locked this mechanism in a place and we can't avoid it. We can't turn it off. It's a part of us now. And this is the thing that we don't realize, that we're doing this as adults. We keep getting in these bad relationships and we're like, I don't know why I always find the worst people, or I always find the messed up people. It's not necessarily that you're searching for a bad person, but your subconsciousness is looking for the wrong thing because of the trauma has changed your views. Welcome, Braden. Appreciate you joining the live. This is Terror to Triumph. I am Alphonso Pelt, and this is a judgment-free zone for survivors of childhood trauma. Not just the survivors of, but people who know people who have been traumatized. Maybe it might have been a family member, or somebody close to you. But this show is to give people the opportunity to speak their piece, speak their voice, tell their story, share their stories, and emerge from the darkness and fear that they've been in all their lives. And this is, again, no way to be therapy or psychiatric evaluation. Not a professional. I am a survivor myself. But this is a forum for people to come and learn and look into themselves and say, hey, I've never addressed that in my life. And I didn't realize it was affecting me a certain way as an adult. And maybe I need to change something. Or I've been trying to tell people, no one will listen. Well, here we'll listen. Here, nobody's going to say, oh, that didn't happen. And you'll find, you'll talk to your friends, you'll talk to family members, and you'll say, hey, I got something to tell you. Something happened to me, and I'm disturbed by it. And you'll tell them your story, and they'll look at you, you playing, that ain't happened. You tripping. Did you take something, or you high? When you hear people say stuff like that, it's not that they don't care about you, but that's a more personal thing to them. Thank you, yours, for joining. This is Terror to Triumph. I'm Alphonso Pelt, and this is a platform where we can share our childhood trauma stories and learn how to emerge from the darkness and fear. But when you hear people say things like this, people are generally afraid to attach themselves to your trauma. It's like a person, when they realize something is messed up, I don't want to deal with that, type of situation. Well, I don't have time. I don't want to be all up in your business. I don't want you telling me all your business. Whatever the situation is, a person disassociating, disconnecting themselves from you for whatever reason that may be. But that doesn't mean that you should stop trying to tell your story. You have to keep trying to tell your story.
Yeah, he's fairly. I'm a charm in. I'm gonna say that he's fairly right on everything he's saying, because we as a people, we tell people we tend to reach out to the wrong people. We think we're reaching out to the right people, and those people do not want to hear what you have to say. They don't believe what you say. They think that you are making up stories, or that couldn't have never happened. I had the best family, and my family was good. You can't tell me your family is this, just like this. But I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a part of childhood trauma. I seen childhood trauma. And I'm just going to say, to protect the causes of the people that maybe feel sympathetic, I'm just going to say Joe and Sue, which were family members, they were abused, and I seen this abuse happen, and it was traumatizing to me because you see people be abused in ways that you didn't think that this was not logically able or possible to happen, which kind of bothered me a whole lot. And as being a child, you couldn't stop it because what are you to do but to get to wrap up things yourself?
Right.
It's it's hurting, and you carry it for years, and you make people in your life, like he said, you push people back, you make people pay for things that they did not do because until I
Right.
got some kind of derpy help when I was 25, now 54 years old. I was pushing people away. I was fighting. I was being abusive myself, to those, because of what I seen or what I felt or what I felt like. I wasn't a part of, I would say, physical abuse. I would say verbal abuse, which you ain't
Mm-hmm.
gonna be nobody. You
Right.
ain't gonna do nothing. You will never be nothing. And
That's also
those
mental
words
abuse.
that
Yep.
hurt. So you don't mean to do anything and you don't really know you constructively doing anything until you told or you pointed out or somebody say, why are you doing this to me? And then when you are pointed out and it's caught, but to tell a little bit about my story, how I was able to get the abuse how I was able to get the help that I needed was something happened real deep one day. And I came in the I came in the house and Susie Mae and Bob was like, I've been calling you. And I was like, at that time, we didn't have cell phones. We had pagers. So I was like, oh, I was robbed at gunpoint. It's nothing because he said, your body, you don't intend, but your body would go into protective mode. You go into defense mode to protect everything about you because you try to block everything that you feel that is not normal. You try to block it and think that it is normal and it's not.
Right.
So that night, it was like, I didn't know this happened. Did something happen to you? No, but I broke down. And that's when I started to tell the story that nobody knew. And they was finding out why I was doing the things that I was doing to certain people. So it was like, I'm gonna get you some help. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they got me some help. And from there, I was able to see through that person's eyes, even though we went through some, me and the therapist, we went backwards and forward, because it's not funny, but I would tell her, I'm not doing it. And me and her would go backwards and forward on some things because the therapist, even know that they're gonna get attacked too. So
Mm.
that's why it's their job to keep on trying to be there for you because they get you attack your therapist and not physical, just mental, with words, verbally. And but I did get help and she stood in there with me. She stood in the gap and she really helped me get over mental things that I thought was normal and they wasn't. So, this man, which I've been knowing for about 15 to 16 years, he would tell you, we done been through some days.
Mm.
It's not, it's to hear his story, which he's gonna tell you, oh my God, it's a blessing that he's still in his right sane mind, because it takes a lot to be in a sane mind and to go through what you went through as a child. But like I
Well,
say, people don't
well,
believe you, but I'm gonna give the mic back to him and let him continue to tell what he tell.
well. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. That was very deep. Like when you got that help, it was like a breath of fresh air, like somebody's acknowledging me and what happened. And I know to you that that had to be a game changer from what you've been going through in your life. I mean, because before that point in time, you were always trying to push it down. You didn't want to talk about it. You didn't really want to explain your story, even though you may have to people, but in your heart, you didn't really want to tell nobody because of the pain that you would be bringing back up to yourself. Thank you, Berlin, Star, Maya, and I can't read that. That is pretty small, but I thank you all for joining. This is the last live to Terror to Triumph, and this is a podcast, live podcast on TikTok about escaping and conquering our childhood traumas, whether it be mental, verbal, physical, or sexual abuse. I am myself a survivor. My name is Alphonso Pelt, and I'm sharing my story along with you. Thank you, Lovely, for joining. This is Terror to Triumph. I just explained that this is a podcast about surviving childhood trauma. Today's episode, we're talking about how childhood trauma affects us as an adult. And I have a guest, Miss House, and she's just shared that how going through childhood affected her abuses affected her and how she had to deal with them until she was able to seek or get therapy. Myself, for my sanity, as you said, I was not all the way there, to be honest with you. I was insane through my journey, my path. There were times where I felt suicidal, especially as a youth. I tried to commit suicide a couple times and got caught, so I didn't actually commit suicide. But I yeah, through the journey, I should have probably been in a mental institution at one point for trying to commit suicide, but that was never the case. So what happened was, thank you for joining, Norvell. I appreciate you joining. This is Terror to Triumph. This is the last podcast that will be on TikTok. We are moving to YouTube next week, November 1st at 8 p.m. Look up the handle Terror to Triumph there, and you will find snippets from last week's episode and full video of last week's podcast. Today, we're talking about how childhood trauma affects us in our adult relationships. I have the guest, Miss House, and she has been forthcoming about what's going on with her and how she found help and received help. Today, we're trying to focus on how childhood trauma causes us to have adverse effects in our relationships. We start off as children, our minds are developing, and in a normal childhood, the parents, the people closest to you, all share love and affection, teach you, and child rear you, which is not abuse. Child rearing is not abuse, it's correction. But when it goes overboard, it becomes abuse. That would be physical. But in normal child rearing, the child learns that the people closest to him can be trusted. But when abuse happens at that stage in life, the change in our mentality becomes the people closest to me cannot be trusted. That means your mind alters and focuses on survival. So you no longer look at people like you can trust them. Your own siblings, you look at them like you can't trust them. Your parents, you can't trust them, or anybody else that would be close to you. Your friends become untrustworthy. And in our adult relationships, we find that we hurt people in our adult relationships, as Ms. House has stated, because we want to receive some form of payback. We want to feel like we are conquering our fear when in actuality it's not being conquered but being perpetuated. We sometimes even invite people in that mimic that dysfunction in our lives because it seems somehow to feel familiar to us. That's why when you hear people saying, I don't understand why you go after these type of relationships and they always turn out to be bad for you, abusive or whatever the case may be. But we're drawn to that because sometimes people who are survivors are drawn to that because of that childhood dysfunctioning part in our minds that has created the protective mechanisms from wanting to be loved to wanting to be nurtured, but also feeling that receiving abuse is the right thing, and that's what we're supposed to be looking for. I'm not going to say the person's name, but a person I knew, God bless them, they're no longer with us. A person I knew once told me that if a man didn't argue with her, then he wasn't a man. If he didn't hit her, that didn't show her that he loved her. So that's today. I didn't know it then when she told me, but that today shows me how childhood trauma manifests in adult relationships in that manner. That woman actually suffered through something and now identified that suffering to be a normal part of life as an adult. So these are things that we are dealing with as adults. Not everybody deals with it the same way. We all deal with it with our own minds, survival tactics, however it develops in our lives. We all different and deal with it in a different way. So when that pattern comes from childhood abuse, it's called trauma bonding. I don't know if you ever heard of that statement, but this happens when abuse is mixed with moments of affection or kindness. Okay. Your nervous system gets caught in a cycle of tension and builds, and abuse happens. And then there's a period of calm or even tenderness. Hello, and welcome to the live. I appreciate you joining. My name is Alphonso Pelt, and this is Terror to Triumph. We are childhood abuse survivors. We are creating a forum where we can come and find peace and no judgment, but we can also talk and share our stories and step out from the darkness and fear that has plagued us and followed us into our adult lives. Okay, I'm going back to where I left off. So there's a period of calm or even your brain releases chemicals during this reconciliation phase, creating intense emotional attachment. So the bonding, the trauma bonding is very, very dangerous. And that's why people do seek relationships that are very traumatic to them. They would go and find somebody who might be, as we call, a player, or somebody who might be a dangerous person because they like bad boys, or for a guy, we might go after a bad girl, somebody who, and I hate this statement, but it's been said for years. Someone who is a saint in public, but a freak in the sheets. So they want good and bad. Well, that's a dynamic of what we call trauma bonding. So something our mind is attaching to from our past, because that trauma was mixed in with a moment of affection, caused our minds to establish a pattern of seeking this dysfunctional relationships in our adulthood. Welcome, Papa. Thank you for joining our live today. Thank you, USN. I appreciate you for joining the live today. This is Terror to Triumph, and we are childhood survivors. We have formed this forum to talk, share, and break free of the darkness and the fear that has plagued our lives all the way into adulthood. We are breaking free from the mental bonds. And I see some people who would like to be invited. I'm going to invite another person here. Today's episode is talking about how our childhood trauma is affecting us as adults and in our relationships. I've been on both sides of trauma bonding. I've stayed in relationships that hurt me because I was addicted to the cycle of tension and relief. I've also unconsciously recreated the dynamic with people I cared about. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because it was the only relationship template that I knew. That was the only mental mechanism that I carried from my childhood that I could understand and relate to. That's dysfunctional thinking. And that comes from our childhood perception of what happened. And we're still carrying that into our adulthood, where it no longer is sustainable. So now we're actually either hurting people from our dysfunction because of our childhood trauma, or we're getting into relationships where we're receiving pain and hurt because we're identifying with the trauma that has happened to us because it was mixed in with a moment of affection. Sometimes trauma can be mixed in with a moment of affection because our abusers would like to act as though it is in a moment of affection for them. But us as children see that and equate that to a moment of affection when it's actually abuse. Thank you, God, first, and thank you, Castor, for joining in on the live today. This is Terror to Triumph. This is a podcast about childhood survival and breaking the silence, okay? Stepping out of the darkness and away from the fear that has encased us in silence all our lives. The first step is acknowledging. The second step is talking, speaking out, telling your truth, telling people, acknowledging, hey, I've been wronged. I've been abused. This is the platform for you to come and do that. And for all of you on the live, I do have numbers that I can share with you on my board for helplines. If you know anybody that needs immediate help, you can call any one of these numbers. I'm going to rattle them off at the end of the show, and that way you can jot them down. I give you time to get your pen and paper together so you can go and share this information with somebody you might know is in immediate need of help. Okay. One of the most powerful ways childhood abuse affects adult relationships is through sabotage. I laugh because that's me. That's me all the way through. I bomb myself out a lot when I'm in a relationship, and I don't think that I'm doing it, but I would always get into arguments about stuff that I do, and I'm like, why am I always getting to this point? I feel like I'm trying to be a good guy. I think I'm doing the right thing. I'm taking the right steps, but in reality, I was doing things that was counterproductive to the relationship and made the other person feel like there's something missing from me that should be there. It made my relationship partner feel like I'm acting as though I'm still single. Not that I'm going out talking to a whole bunch of other women or anything, but other nuances I would still do. They would tell me that they feel more like a best friend rather than a lover. And that statement would always hurt me because I did care for them. But it was the things that I was still doing that made them feel this way. And I could not undo that mental damage that I had, that trauma that stayed with me all my life because I didn't know it was there. And then I even recall to myself saying, oh, you tripping. Because you can't be tripping about that. I mean, that's so simple. That's not even important. And I would think to myself that that's really how I was thinking. But in reality, to somebody else, stepping outside the box, trying to be empathetic about the situation, it does matter to them. And it is important. And are not just tripping, they actually see something is wrong in me. Thank you, Skull, and thank you, User, for joining. This is Terror to Triumph. This is a podcast that allows survivors of childhood trauma to come and share their stories and step out of the darkness and fear that has plagued them all their lives. This is a judgment-free zone. We don't judge here. And like Miss House, she was allowed to share her story, but there's no pressure. Anybody who joins up, I don't tell them they have to speak. I don't jab at them with questions, but you might want to ask a question, and that's fair. So you can ask questions. But for anybody who joins up as a guest, I let them chime in whenever they feel like they want to chime in. It's a totally comfortable environment. And if you choose to want to come on and share your story, you're free and welcome to do so. I invite everybody to go to Terror, the number 2, and Triumph at gmail.com. Leave me a message and I'll get back to you. And we'll set something up where on the next show you can come on and be a guest. That way I can reach you and you can be allowed to share your story however you see fit. But this is an adult platform. This is not for children, but this is for adults to recognize red flags in children so they can help their families or help somebody who they know are struggling. They can see it now. One of the red flags, I'm going to share something else with you guys right quick. When I had suffered my trauma, before I had suffered my trauma, I was very open. I was very accepting to people around me. I was a free type of spirit. I would dance. I didn't care who was around. I didn't care who saw. And I knew I couldn't dance all that great, but I just felt free enough to dance. And I would do that wherever I was. I would sing, not caring if I was off key or not. I didn't care who was around, but I love to sing. And being that type of person, always wanting to be around other people and joke and laugh and have fun with other people, that was my spirit. But that got taken away from me the day that trauma happened. After that day, it was like night and day. I shut down. I stopped speaking to people. I stayed in my room. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I mean, family or anybody. I didn't want to go outside. I mean, it got to a point where I literally stepped outside my bedroom window on the second floor, and I was about to jump head first to the concrete. If the next door neighbor hadn't caught me and say, "What the hell are you doing?" it made me jump back inside the window because I didn't want nobody to see that, as it happened. I'm not trying to traumatize nobody else, even though my death would have traumatized somebody. But looking back at it, but as a kid, that's how I was thinking. So this is what I'm saying. That was a flag. When I shut down and my personality changed and I didn't want to speak to nobody, that was a big red flag. My mother felt it, and she asked me, she said, "You used to talk to me all the time. Now you don't talk to me anymore. Why you don't talk to me anymore?" She was accurate, 100% on point with that statement. Nothing wrong with that statement. She was 100% perfect. The problem was she was the one who assaulted me. So I couldn't give her an answer. I just looked at her. I looked down at the ground and I didn't want to say nothing. Because not only was my mother my sexual abuser, my mother was also my verbal, my mental, and my physical abuser. So if I opened my mouth and told her why, I don't know if I'd be here today, to be honest with you. But it was that type of situation. So I played deaf and mute. That was my survival tactics as a kid. I'd rather seem dumb to you than to tell you how I felt. And that carried on all the way into my adult life. Hello, Robert. Thank you for joining the live of Terror to Triumph. Hello, Desire. I thank you both for joining. Hi, Zach. Thank you for joining Terror to Triumph. This is the last live on TikTok for this week. I'll be going to YouTube live next week, November 1st at 8 p.m. This is a podcast, live podcast. This is about childhood trauma and the survivors of. We are talking to people and amongst ourselves about our childhood traumas to open up and shed the darkness and the fear that has gripped us all our lives. I'm providing any type of information and mechanisms that can help a person to escape those fears and that darkness by shedding light on my own story. I'm being 100% transparent on here. If you guys want to ask me any questions, you're free to do so. But the first step is recognizing that there is a problem. Second step is opening your mouth and speaking on it. That's the most powerful step because you deny it from happening again when you start speaking out on it. But as you start speaking out on it, you come across people who would say that didn't happen. Of course, you don't stop at that point. You keep going. You keep talking until somebody listens. And you might have to go even further than that because they might listen to you and it doesn't manifest. So you have to keep talking. Okay, today's episode is about how childhood trauma affects us in our adult lives and our relationships. On a more immediate sense, we're talking about how trauma bonding, which is the traumatic experience we had as children was mixed with a sort of affection, or as we perceived it was some type of affection. And our minds as children, malleable as they were, God bless us all, tried to perceive that as some type of way that we should look for relationships in our lives. That's why many of us look for and seek bad relationship after bad relationship after bad. We look at a person, we can tell they ain't gonna be the person that we need, but we're attracted to that because we like the mechanism where we feel where there's tension and then relief, tension and relief. We don't really realize we're doing these things, just like we're doing self-sabotage in our relationships, which is also a mechanism that we've developed from our childhood trauma. We've become dysfunctional because we do things that we're unconscious that we're doing, and we get into arguments about it, and we try to figure out why am I doing this, or this isn't that bad, that's not that serious, or whatever. We try to rationalize it. And when in actuality, it is that bad, and we're not looking with empathy from our significant other's point of view and seeing how it's hurting them. On the other hand, we could also turn up to be the abusers and hurt the ones that we care about, getting in relationship after relationship, hurting other people. You heard about how people have one night stands and stuff like that. That's a form of abuse, really, because you're looking to fill a gap that you can never fill by doing that. So we keep jumping from person to person. And in the name of doing that, we lie sometimes to the person as if we're really attracted to them, as we're really trying to form a more permanent bond, when in actuality we are not. So we jump into these relationships and out of these relationships because it's a feeling of like some type of control that we've lost. So the person that hurt, that we hurt, in turn receives that physical any mental damage. You know, that's mental, kind of like mental abuse and sexual abuse when you do a person like that. But we don't really talk about that today because that's looked at as normal. It's normal to lie to somebody, sleep with them, and then ghost them. That's a normal part of life. We look at it like that, but that's not normal. That's dysfunctional. You know, we don't address these issues as adults. That's a childish thing. And we do childish things as adults. There's a misfire there we're not addressing. And that comes from something in our past that told us it was okay to do these things. So, with that being said, one of the most painful ways childhood abuse is through self-sabotage. We might unconsciously choose a partner who is or are unemotional or unavailable and distant. We might create conflict when things are going well, and we might struggle with intimacy or vulnerability. Why? I'll tell you why in just a second. TikTok has this thing on here where if you're on for a certain period of time, it makes you do one of those CAPTCHA type things. And it's a slider type CAPTCHA. It's not the check I'm not a robot thing. So if you don't get the slider just right, You had to keep doing it. So I apologize to my listeners for that. Apologize to you, guest Miss House, for that pause or break in our show. I'm actually way past time, but I started late today and I wanted to get everything out there. Okay, on some ground level, we believe we don't deserve love. We believe we're broken. We believe that if somebody really knew us, they leave. That's me. That's 100% me. I ain't gonna lie. That's me right there. So we make sure they do before they can discover the truth about us. Yep. 100% on point. 100% on point. There's been so many relationships where at the end of the relationship, I felt like I needed to do something bad to make her leave me because I felt it would be better if she left me and felt I was a bad guy than if I stayed and if she found out what was really going on with me. Wow. Wow, that's a deep one right there, y'all. That's a big one. That's knowing self-sabotage. Not the other one where you're doing stuff and you don't think it's enough to really do things or be anything. This is flat out knowing you're going to sabotage the relationship. Consciously knowing you're
Yeah, I
going to
done did it.
sabotage the relationship. Yeah. I mean,
I done
wow.
did it. I have self sabotaged many relationships because I didn't feel like I was worthy to that person. I felt like, I didn't, I felt like, no, I don't want you to know this side of me. You getting too close. And I wanted the love, but didn't know how to give that love.
Mm. Mm. They said this is the voice of the trauma speaking. That when you try to reject a person because you don't want them to know the truth, that's the voice of the trauma speaking. It's the internalized shame that was placed in us as children. It takes real awareness and work to recognize it and change it. Hello, We Digger. Welcome to Trauma to Triumph. This is the last episode on TikTok. We're moving to YouTube next week. Welcome, Shakayla. I don't want to pronounce anybody's name wrong, so charge it to my head and not my heart if I get your name wrong. I thank you for joining Trauma to Terror to Triumph. I'm sorry. This is the last live on TikTok. We'll be moving to YouTube next week, November 1st at 8 p.m. We invite everyone to join us there. We will have live interactions with the guests, polls, Q&A sections at the end of the cast, and guest speakers, whoever would like to come on the show. We invite you to go to Terror, Terror, the number 2, the Terror, the number 2, Triumph, Triumph, at gmail.com to reach out to us and let us know you want to be on the show, and then we can arrange to have you as a guest on next week's show. Right now, we just talked about a big thing in childhood survivors who are in relationships as an adult and things that we do that have negative impacts that are directly resulting from our childhood trauma. The last thing we talked about was sabotaging our relationships, whether it be doing little things that you don't think are really big things. You're doing them subconsciously, and your significant other is telling you that, why you do this, why you do that, why you doing it, and it's aggravating them. But you're looking at them like, that's not such a big deal. That's no big deal. but you're rationalizing it to yourself when in actuality you're not empathizing with your partner and really trying to deal with the situation as it's playing out. It's Jay. Welcome to the live. Welcome to the live. This is Terror to Triumph. This is a live podcast on TikTok. We'll be moving next week to YouTube. Look up Terror to TO Triumph on YouTube. And when you find the handle, you'll find a clip from last week episode and a full clip from the podcast. You can also go to www.terror2triumph, T-O Triumph terror2triumph.buzzsprout.com to listen to the audio podcast. Conceal, thank you. RV, thank you for joining. Appreciate you. Miss House, you have to go. It's okay. I appreciate you and thank you for joining me on the live. Appreciate your comments. Everything you said was on point. And I thank you for sharing your story, being a part of this community.
Yes. It was nice being here on the podcast. It was nice sharing my story to everybody that's available. And, don't forget to give those people those tags, that they need. If they need help, don't forget to give those numbers.
I sure will. Right at the end, I'm going to give out everybody numbers for them to use or give to people who are in need of immediate assistance. If you know somebody that's going through trauma or if you are experiencing trauma yourself, I have several numbers to give in several areas that you may be experiencing it to receive the help that you may need. The path forward is to realize that these patterns aren't our fault. We didn't choose them. But healing is your responsibility. Not in a shameful way, but in an empowering way. Recognizing how childhood abuse affects your adult relationships is the first step. It means you can start to make different choices. You can learn what secure attachment looks like. You can build relationships based on trust instead of fear, and you can break the cycle. If you are listening to this and you're recognizing yourself, if you can see your own patterns in what I'm describing, I want you to know that you're not alone, and that more importantly, change is possible. Some questions to sit down with this week. What attachment style do you think you developed as a child? Are these patterns in your adult relationships that mirror your childhood experiences? Have you experienced trauma bonding? Can you recognize it now? Where do you sabotage yourself in relationships? These aren't easy questions, but asking them is brave, and it's the beginning of healing. This topic is deeply personal to me, and I know many of you are carrying this pain right now. I want to hear from you. So, have you recognized these patterns in your own relationship? And share your story. Come on with me next week. You can share anonymously, or you can go to terror2triumph@gmail.com and let me know that you want to be a part of the show. You can also view the podcast that will be on next week, November 1st at 8 p.m. on YouTube. If you look up Terror to Triumph, the handle will be there. Not the number 2 on that, the word T-O. That's Terror T-O Triumph on YouTube. You look up the handle there, you will see the last week's podcast. This week's podcast won't be posted until Thursday. The audio podcast on Terror to Triumph, T-O Triumph, at buzzsprout.com. And then you can catch the video upload of the podcast on Friday. And then we do a new podcast on Saturday. And we repeat the cycle. So I thank everybody for joining. Hussein, Sohib, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Forgive me, charge it to my head, not my heart. The People's CH. I appreciate you all for joining the live and for the questions. I mean, not the questions, but for the numbers. I promised you all there's a Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline. The number to that is 1-800-422-4453. Again, that's the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline. The number is 1-800-422-4453. Okay, I'm going to repeat that number one more time before I move on to the next one. Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline, 1-800-422-4453. Then the next number is the National Sexual Abuse Hotline. That means, and when it's a national, that's anywhere in the country. You can call this one number. It don't matter if you're in Florida, California, New York, or if you're in Wyoming. It don't matter where you are in the country. You can call this number and somebody be there to receive you and give you the help or point you in the direction where you can receive the help you need. So the National Sexual Abuse Hotline number is 1-800-656-4673. Mr. G, thank you for joining Terror to Triumph. We are at the end of the show, of the podcast, and we're talking about childhood trauma, surviving childhood trauma as an adult, and escaping the darkness, the fear that has encompassed us all our lives. We invite you to enjoy next week's show, which will be on YouTube with the handle Terror, T-O Triumph on YouTube. You can go there now and look at last week's podcast. That was our inaugural episode. And this is the second episode here on TikTok. We're moving next week to YouTube. So please look for us there next week at 8 p.m. on Saturday. The next number is National Domestic Violence Hotline. That number is 1-800-799-7233. That's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. You can call this number 24 hours. They are open 24/7. If you're in need of immediate help or assistance, you can call these numbers and someone will be there to receive you and point you in the direction that you need to go to receive the help you need. Welcome, welcome. I do not know how to pronounce that whatsoever. Welcome, Jada. This is Terror to Triumph, the live broadcast of the podcast, Terror to Triumph. This is the last one to be on TikTok. We're moving. We're going to YouTube next week, November 1st at 8 p.m. So feel free to join us. This is about surviving childhood trauma as adults. This is a judgment-free zone. We welcome everybody to come and listen. If you want to be a part of the show, you want to be a guest, or you just want to share your story, you can come to Terror, the number 2, Triumph, at gmail.com. Leave your name and information and I'll get back to you and we'll set it up how you could be on next week's show. I'm moving to YouTube because YouTube has more engagement. It allows me to engage with the listeners a little bit better. There will be polls. There'll be actual Q&A at the end of the session. And as this episode, I will be giving out help numbers so you can give to your family, your friends, anybody who needs assistance, and just to have them on standby. You never know who might need the help. Hello, Mrs. CM6. Welcome to Terror to Triumph. I appreciate you joining. This is at the end of the show, but if you could come back to YouTube next week and look up the handle Terror to Triumph, T-O Triumph, you will find us there Saturday, November 1st at 8 p.m. This is a show about surviving childhood trauma as an adult and looking for flags, actually, in your family and friends and your children, neighbors, whoever. You know, there's flags the children exhibit to tell you there's something wrong with them. They won't come out and just tell you, oh, Mr. G touched me there. You know, you have to really pay attention to your children and to know something's happened, or would be better if you would talk in advance, have this talk in advance to your children about inappropriate adult touching, okay? And speaking out if something does happen to you, and who to go to talk to somebody when something happens. So you have to let them know who they can trust. Because when something like that happens, the trust issue goes out the door with children. They don't trust anybody at that point. Because usually when it happens, it's somebody close. It's somebody they trust. So I'm saying that as a survivor of childhood abuse, and I had the four horsemen riding me all my life: sexual abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, all of them, verbal. So I had them all. And now I'm 54 years old and I'm reaching out to anybody who will listen, because we need to start exposing this stuff. It's happening in our communities way more often than we talk about. And there's a lot more situations that it happens in plain day and during the day out in the open, where we think it's normal, but it's not a normal behavior. So I invite everybody to join next week on YouTube at 8 p.m. on T-O Triumph on YouTube. The next number, let me repeat the last number one more time. National Domestic Violence Hotline, that number is 1-800-799-7233. Okay? The next number is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The National Human Trafficking Hotline. That's like a number you can call if you need somebody to come pick you up, if somebody had captured you, you escaped, if you found a way to contact somebody to get some help. If you can't get away, you can call this number and help will be there sooner than you think. Somebody will be on the phone 24/7 waiting to receive your call, and they will get you the assistance that you need. That number is 1-888-737. I'm sorry, 1-888. That's my dyslexia kicking in. I apologize. 1-888-373-7888. Again, that number is 1-888-373-7888. Dyslexia, get away from me. Huh? Welcome. This is Terror to Triumph. This is the live podcast broadcast on TikTok. The last one, actually. We're moving. We're going to YouTube next week, November 1st at 8 p.m. Look for the handle Terror, T-O Triumph on YouTube, and you will find the live podcast from last week. a couple clips out of the podcast, and you could view what happened last week there. Also, if you cannot or you choose to go to an audio format, you can check out last week's podcast on Terror, T-O, Triumph dot Buzzsprout. That's BUZZSPROUT.com. Welcome. Appreciate you for Man Alone for joining us. This is Terror to Triumph. This is episode, basically, this is a podcast about surviving childhood trauma, and we're inviting any and everybody who has suffered to come and listen. You don't have to participate on the show, but we're giving out information that's pertinent to the situation, helping people to understand that they are not alone, and we're trying to get everyone to come out from the darkness and the fear that has gripped them all their lives, so they can share their story and rise above and triumph and be the person they were meant to be in this life. My name is Alphonso Pelt, and I'm here. I'm sharing my story and 100% disclosure, all the good, bad, and ugly. I'm telling you all about it. If you ask, I'm going to answer it. So if you don't want to hear about it, do not ask, because I'm going to tell you everything. Okay, with that being said, we are on the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I'm giving out these numbers so you can jot them down and probably keep them around the house in case you might need them later to give to a friend, or just have them to give away to people who might need them. Somebody might be suffering, who could use these numbers. A child you might know might need one of the numbers. I had a Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline number I gave away earlier. And if you know somebody's child is suffering, you can call that number and somebody will help you right then and there, or at least point you in the direction that you need to go to receive the help you need. That National Human Trafficking Hotline number, one last time, that number is 1-888-373-7888. See, my dyslexia is kicking in on 3s and 7s. Okay. 1-888-373-7888. That's the number. Moving on to the last number. The last number, Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Okay? Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. That number is very simple. It's 988. The Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. The number to that is 988. It's very simple. These are national hotlines you can call 24/7, anytime. They're always manned. Somebody's always at the phone ready. So you can call these numbers and receive the help that you need. Again, I'm going to run through them right quick for the people who are just joining. Thank you for joining, Tara. This is Terror to Triumph, the live broadcast of the podcast, Terror to Triumph. This is the last one that will be on TikTok. We're moving. We're going to YouTube. So look up the handle, Terror, T-O, Triumph, on YouTube, and you'll find last week's video podcast there and some clips from it. Also, you will be able to listen to the audio podcast if you choose. You can go to www.terrortriumph.buzzsprout.com. That's BUZZSPROUT.com. And you can listen to the audio broadcast of this. Every live goes out Thursday. It's a recap. So today, this podcast will be put out on YouTube on Friday. And then the audio edit of this podcast will be distributed on Buzzsprout on Thursday. So you can always stay in the loop with Terror to Triumph and keep up with everything, any information that we give out. If you know somebody that's suffering, it doesn't matter Trauma is trauma. If you know somebody that's suffering, any of these numbers can help them. You can give them to the people that are suffering, and they can receive the help that they need, okay? So right quick, recap. Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline. The number is 1-800-422-4453. The National Sexual Abuse Hotline. The number there, 1-800-656-4673. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-888-373-7888. Haha, I got that one right finally. My dyslexia, you are overridden. Anyway, the last one, Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, 988. Okay, I will be giving out these numbers at the end of every episode from here forth. And I thank everyone for joining me today. This was an extra long episode, but I had a lot of information to disseminate to you. And I want you all to know that help is available. Help is closer than you think. And you are not alone. This is Terror to Triumph, where we come together in a judgment-free zone to discuss, talk, and share information about our childhood traumas so that we can learn to become stronger together as a community of survivors and triumph over trauma. My name is Alphonso Pelt. I am your host, and I will be sharing my story in each and every episode. And I thank you for joining us. Please like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever is over there on the side or at the bottom, because I'm doing this for several platforms. So I want you guys to share the word, tell people about this podcast, let them know there's somebody out here fighting for you. If you know somebody that's suffering or has been traumatized, let them know somebody is out here fighting for you. Direct them to this broadcast of podcast, Terror to Triumph. If you want to be a guest on the show, please reach out to me, Terror, the number 2, Triumph at gmail.com, and leave your name and information. I will reach you as soon as possible, and we can discuss how we can get you on the show for the next episode. Thank you again for joining me. I appreciate and I bless all of you in the name of Jesus. Thank you for following me. I appreciate you all, and I wish everyone a speedy recovery, a healthy recovery, and that everyone gets the help that they so deserve. God bless you all. Thank you.